The weakness and incompetence of Joe Biden foolishly allowed the killing to start in the first place. Until President Trump returned to office in January, the bloody and broken Biden status quo was to endlessly force American taxpayers to fund Ukraine no matter the cost, no matter how long it takes, and no matter how many lives were lost. There is no denying that Biden's America Last foreign policy moved the world further away from peace. President Trump rejected that failed approach and instead, over the last 7 months, has relentlessly pursued peace throughout his second term.
President Trump has relentlessly pursued peace throughout his second term, other than continuing to support the Russia-Ukraine war, other than continuing to support all the deaths of the Palestinian people in the Middle East. And apparently, according to news just in the last, that broke out actually today, he's about ready to go and start bombing Venezuela. And his top military officials have presented him with apparently a range of options. Wow, what to make of this? The peace president gets ready to launch the Tomahawk yet again. And we have to try to break this down with us today. The Prince of Peace on this earth, not to be confused with, no, those are small peas, but we consider him. So anyway, Matthew Hoh, what in the world is going on here?
Hey, Danny, thanks for having me on. Yeah, I thought you'd be out of business by now. I thought your military, I thought there'd be no need for a guy like you, a platform.
And listen,
like
I was thinking
this.
about moving to football because I was thinking
exactly
talking about what happened last Sunday.
Right? You know, I mean, like, so yeah, no, it's look, Trump's an imperial president, just like all his predecessors, and he's different in shape and substance and how he views the world. But he still has the same priorities and obligations of office to maintain and, if able, expand the empire. I think with regards to Venezuela, it's part of what I think we're starting to see as a Trump grand strategy, if you will. There's a lot of madness, but I think we can see a little bit of the method in it. And that's consolidation of America's empire, focusing on what we can possess and not getting overextended. And I think the Trumpian vision here is that we are already in a multipolar world, that unlike his predecessors, Biden or Obama or Bush, whose policies were to maintain the unipolar power of the United States, to remain the world's sole superpower, to maintain American hegemony. I think Trump and the people around him understand that that's long past, that that's an impossible task. And so how do we reshape the American empire in order to not just succeed in this multipolar world, but to be dominant in it? And I think this is why there's this emphasis on what the Western Hemisphere, particularly now beginning with Venezuela. There are certainly a lot of other factors involved in that, but that's what I see here. Of course, the neoconservatives have won in Venezuela for a very long time. And the first American coup against modern Venezuela was what, 2001 or 2002. So this is not anything new. But I think the way it fits into, I think, the Trump foreign policy, or his view of the American empire, of course, merges or dovetails very well with neoconservative desire for Venezuela. The fact Venezuela's got the world's largest oil reserves, Marco Rubio's obsession, not just Venezuela, but the entire region, as well as it fits into the narrative at play with regards to Trump's domestic policy. So just as you could have Marco Rubio whispering into one ear of the president saying why regime change in Venezuela is necessary, in the other ear you can have Stephen Miller whispering into his ear saying, hey, this is integral to our operations here in the United States. So that's why there's been this really heavy emphasis, completely false, of course, fabricated, that Venezuela is a narco-terror state. These boats we're bombing are each going to kill 25,000 Americans with their fentanyl loads, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera, when we know that that's not where fentanyl comes from, right? So, yeah, there's a lot that goes into it, but I think the reality is that we've seen this before. And so I think we can extrapolate how it will go, including increasing instability throughout the region.
Yeah, unfortunately, this is, like you say, it's nothing new. I mean, it's nothing new even for this administration. Forget about back to 2001,
Yeah.
where there was in Trump's first administration this really bad, ham-fisted attempt to barely concealed try to do a coup against Venezuela, and John Bolton, the brilliant strategist, was behind that one, and that completely collapsed and fell apart in our face. Gary, if you do you have that map that you had up the other day where all those strikes were in the Caribbean Sea? If you can see if you can grab that, because
Yeah,
I'm
I'll
going to
get
pull.
that. I'll get
Thank
that.
you, and just pull that up in just a second. But in the meantime, I want to pull up something because we're going to talk about this in a little bit more detail about what the substance even allegedly is here. And this is from actually today where Trump was talking about. Gary, if you can fill that first full screen up. Where the officials have been meeting with President Trump yesterday, allegedly. And in that news, this is from CBS News, it's reported over the last 2 months, U.S. military has conducted strikes against at least 21 vessels it alleges were ferrying drugs to South America to the from the South America to the U.S. One strike had 2 separate boats. At least 80 alleged smugglers have been killed in the strikes. 2 survived and 2 were repatriated to their home countries of Ecuador and Colombia. The man released in Ecuador was freed because authorities there found no evidence he had committed a crime. Now, here is the first evidence that we really have a problem here. The administration, when they've been asked, Matt, about what is the intelligence here, and they always say, we have rock solid intelligence. We know exactly what's going on, exactly what these boats had on them, where they came from, all of this kind of stuff. And yet they've never provided any of that evidence to anybody in the media. They just keep saying over and over it is. And I want to look at this from a couple of different perspectives. First of all, you see that the Ecuadorian government said, yeah, we let the guy go because we found no evidence that he had done anything wrong. Ergo, everybody else who was on that sub that had been killed, at least according to them, was not doing anything illegal. I don't know if that's just something they want to do to make the United States look bad, but I know the Colombian president has been beside himself with rage sometimes because he says some of the people killed there were, at least one of the boats was a fisherman that was from Colombia and wasn't doing anything about drugs. What do you think about that?
Yeah, I think what did the Colombian President Gustavo Petro describe the situation as? A gang of pedophiles wants to destroy our democracy. I mean, which I think is probably a pretty accurate description. With the case of Ecuador is pretty friendly with this administration. So the Ecuadorians, if I could see the Colombians releasing the guy because of the relationship between Colombia and the United States now, but Ecuador has good relations with this administration, better than Colombia. So the fact that the Ecuadorians didn't hold on to the guy and they said we found no evidence of crime really shows there's nothing there. And this is what members of Congress have said, including Republican members of Congress. The administration has come in and briefed us, and they've not provided any evidence. The administration doesn't even know the names of the people they're killing. I mean, so this is just wanton murder. This is just extrajudicial assassination, and there's no evidence. There's no details, and these men are being killed out at sea in international waters for alleged crimes that don't carry the death penalty here in the United States. So this is just simply such a gross and horrendous violation of international and American law. But this is the theater, the national security theater that all administrations have used. And I would say that this is on successive administrations, including Democratic ones, for allowing crimes like this to have occurred. I mean, as far as we know, Trump hasn't killed any Americans yet with drones. Obama killed 2 Americans with drones. Certainly we had this Dick Cheney pass away, and there's a lot of reflection on Cheney's vice presidency and all that he did, all that he put into motion. And the fact that Cheney and others were never held accountable for what they did, for breaking American law, for lying us into war, for authorizing torture, for authorizing mass violations of our First, Fourth, and Fifth Amendments, and then not being held to account. Well, there's a direct through line, Danny, from that absence of justice, that absence of accountability, to right now where President Trump and his people feel like they can operate with impunity, because the reality is they can. They can. No, who's going to stop them? And when it's all said and done, what's going to happen? Nothing is going to happen. I mean, even a lot of the protests that are coming from the Democrats on these killings and on this, what looks like preparation for war against Venezuela and this regime change operation, it's all procedural. It's all, well, he didn't come to Congress first. He's not doing it the right way. He's not illegally killing people with the right process. I mean, so this
I guess there is that,
right? I mean, but we shouldn't be surprised that here we are, because the history tells us the mechanisms that are available allow for this, and then certainly we see no opposition whatsoever that's going to do anything to really stop it.
Yeah, and at least on the confines of our channel and through the context of our conversation here, we are going to point out things that are true and real, whether they want to or not. And let's kind of track a little bit here about even the alleged justification for all this. And one of the claims is that, well, Maduro's he's in office illegally. He didn't pass our judicial or our system that we think is right. So he didn't meet our criteria. So I guess that's really bad. And then other people say, well, no, it's a little bit more crass than that. It's just about the oil. We want his oil. Well, apparently Maduro did get that memo, and he came out and said, well, hey, look, you want our oil? Cool. Here it is. Come and get it. Apparently saying some version of, you can have our oil. I just want to keep my spot here. But if you want the oil, cool, come and get it. When asked about that in the Oval Office a little bit ago, Trump had this reaction.
Maduro offered everything in his country, all the natural resources. He even recorded a message to you in English recently, offering mediation. What should he do in order to stop that?
He has offered everything. He's offered everything. You're right. You know why? Because he doesn't want to fuck around with the United States.
Okay, aside from just the crass way that it's just beneath the dignity of the Oval Office to be able to talk like that in such a common way, we'll leave that one aside for the moment. But I mean, let's look at the fundamental, the very practical issue. They're pretty big. He has literally offered everything, even if you're looking at the crass view that we're just trying to take his oil, and then he says, sure, come and get the oil. But that elicits, the F word from Trump, and the USS Gerald R. Ford continued steaming on from that day. Why do you think that the administration wouldn't be sufficiently satisfied with getting everything they want without even having to use military power?
It's the entitlement that comes with the empire, that comes with the presidency. This is the same thing that occurs in the George W. Bush administration, where Saddam Hussein essentially offered up everything, offered to allow the inspectors in, offered to if I recall correctly, leave power. And that was not good enough. They had to have their pound of flesh. They had to have a war for their own political purposes, right? For their own self-enrichment. And I think it's the case here as well. Certainly the idea that the Venezuelans would probably be better off with the American oil companies coming fully back in. They'd be better off if they didn't have sanctions at all and they were able to do what they want. But that's not a realistic thing. So Venezuela has been hurting for so long under these sanctions that for them to say, yeah, we'll help, we'll give you the oil, that would only in turn, be a blow to their national pride and their sovereignty and all, but it would allow their oil to be back on the markets. But that's not good enough for the Americans. The Americans want the entire thing. The Americans want to make an example out of Venezuela. And again, they want some of it goes to Rubio's background on this, his obsession with this. He wants victory, right? He wants redemption. He wants he wants scorched earth, if you will, in many ways against the communists. He's been obsessed with this ever since he was a boy, it seems. And then other aspects, or as I was saying before, you have this desire of the United States to fully consolidate its hold on Venezuela, on Latin America, on the Western Hemisphere. And so having just a deal with Venezuela where Chevron's allowed to do as much as they want in Venezuela is not simply enough for our interests and our view of the world, the needs of the empire. We need the whole thing. So I think there's a number of reasons that are going into it. Why Trump and his administration don't accept that offer. But unfortunately, I think that the main one is that it simply wouldn't look good enough for them. It's simply too easy. It doesn't fulfill the whole narrative of what they've been saying. If you have now been staking your, if you've been staking your rationale on the idea that Venezuela is sending speedboats thousands of miles across the waters. They're coming into the United States, and each of those boats are killing 25,000 people. Trump has said it repeatedly. How do you then say, okay, but you can stay in power? So you see this over and over again. I think this is the case with, say, Zelensky and the Ukrainians. How do the Europeans and the Americans give up, right, their narrative on Ukraine and Russia all these years later? When Putin is the next Hitler, when Maduro is the next Hitler, how do you then turn around and say we can make a deal with this person? So through their own narratives, through their own statements, they kind of paint themselves into a corner, I think.
I guess. I mean, who knows if they're painting themselves in a corner or they don't even think about that. They don't even concern about corners. They just want, you said a second ago, their pound of flesh. Well, it turns out Trump is looking for a lot more than a pound. And when he was asked recently about, you mentioned a second ago that some of the Democrats have been saying, hey, let's have these congressional hearings or so because we have to have the rule of law followed within the United States, et cetera. Well, President Trump was asked about that very thing, and they said, hey, why don't you just do it? Why don't you just declare a war on Maduro?
I don't think we're going to necessarily ask for a declaration of war. I think we're just going to kill people that are bringing drugs into our country. Okay, we're going to kill them.
So this is pretty blatantly and out in the open here. Nobody challenged him on that. None of the media did when he made the statement there that is in the direct contradiction to international law, the U.S. Constitution, and American law, probably a ton of different laws. And as you correctly pointed out a second ago, drug running is not a lethal offense. You can't get a capital punishment on that, even in the United States. And yet he's like, I'm just not worried about the Constitution. Don't care about that. So I won't do a declaration of war. I'm just going to kill them. Don't care what U.S. law says. Don't care what even UN or international or anything else like that. We're just going to kill them. Very, very unemotional, very matter of factly. And like moving on to the next question, what does that tell you?
Well, it goes back to as well, Danny, to this idea we were talking before about how previous administrations have put us into this position where there is impunity, where the Trump administration feels they can do wherever they want. The justice is, there was an attempt put forward by Tim Kaine and Rand Paul to pass a war powers resolution with regards to Venezuela. And that failed in the U.S. Senate last week. But the Trump Justice Department's response to the war powers resolution, why they felt it wouldn't apply, was more or less the same response the Obama administration gave with regards to their action in Libya. That the same justifications for why the president should be able to carry out these wars without congressional oversight, without any type of limitation, was near identical to what the Obama administration said in 2011. So this construct that we're in, this infrastructure that the president maintains to be able to carry out whatever type of military operation he wants around the world, whether it be limited all the way up to a full war, this is an infrastructure that has been sustained by Congress's inaction, by allowing presidents to get away with it time after time. And it's always seems to be they're allowed to get away with it because it's our guy, right? So the Democrats are against Bush. And then if we recall, when you were involved in this stuff, when we're going into Congress and speaking against what's happening in Libya, speaking about what's happening in Syria, who were the ones that we were getting in with more often than not? Republicans, because it was Obama's war. So just the partisan aspect of this is so sickening. Right. It's so revolting But this, unfortunately, is the reality of our government.
And it continues on to this day. You said that kind of set the stage for it. Well, one can only imagine where this is going to go from here. Here's another interesting thing. So Trump says the ostensible, at least band-aid you want to put on this is for the public, I guess, at large. It appears that there's a combination of two different things going on here. On the one, he doesn't even hide it. I'm just going to kill him. Because I think that he perceives that makes some of his supporters happy. And I have seen some reaction that is the case. Some do. They're cheering that on. But then there's, I guess, there's other people who are uncomfortable with the apparent illegality of it, that then he gives this cover. Well, it's about drugs. It's about stopping the fentanyl. Everybody's agreed with that for a long time, and that's a hot button issue. So I'll just jump on that. And that this is all about protecting you. This is about protecting you in the homeland. So we've got to do whatever it takes here. So we're going to interdict these boats. Well, here's this weird thing. Secretary of State Marco Rubio yesterday definitely poured cold water on that and actually admitted it doesn't even work.
Interdictions continue. The problem is interdictions alone are not effective. You have to disincentivize this industry that these terrorists are using to flood our country with heroin, with cocaine, with fentanyl, and by the way, destabilize the Caribbean in the process. Interdictions have limited to no deterrent effect. These drug organizations, they've already baked in the fact they may lose 5% of their drug shipments. It doesn't stop them from continuing to do it. What you have seen is an impact on drug boats. You have seen much less of them. You're starting to see it. It's in both the Pacific and in the Caribbean basin, especially in the Caribbean.
So it has limited to no effect, and they bake in some amount of loss. Ergo, you just admitted that what we're doing has literally no effect on the drug flow at all. If even that that's even going to the United States, because as many people have pointed out, those drug boats, from where they had, Gary showed you that graphic a while ago, they don't have the fuel to be able to make it with a full tank. They can't get to the United States. So they were going elsewhere. And the claim is, oh, that's right. Well, I know. When they got to the shore, then it was going to go to America. That's what it was. That's how we get this thing. They couldn't make it. So there's just as thin of a gruel as you can imagine. It's like giving somebody a cup of water and saying, boy, this is great, hearty beef soup. What do you think of it?
Yeah, right. I mean, it reminds me of Joe Biden saying with regards to the U.S. Navy's war in the Red Sea against the Yemenis, of course it's not going to make a difference, but we're still going to do it. It's not, of course it's not going to work, but we're still going to do it, and he gets away with it. Right. So why should we expect anything different in this case? Exactly, Danny, those boats, from everything we seem to know about this, the drug traffic in the Caribbean, goes to Europe or to Western Africa. It doesn't come to the U.S. And that the drug traffic that ostensibly the administration is concerned about, particularly fentanyl, which is, killing more than 100,000 Americans every year, that's coming overland. That comes through Mexico, and the majority of it's brought in by American citizens, not guys on boats coming from, Colombia or Ecuador or Venezuela. And a side note on all that, because this is, I know something, we are and this is how we know each other. This all goes back to Afghanistan, right? I mean, this drug crisis, this epidemic of overdose deaths in the United States, where 125,000 a year are dying. What does that come from? What does that come out of? That comes out of the mass surge in Afghanistan's poppy production, its opium production. The United States lied for years about that it wasn't affecting us here. And that's not the case. Those drugs, that opium, that heroin was coming here to the United States. That begins a mass epidemic in the last 20 years. Because recall, this to go back even further, under the Taliban, Afghanistan was not producing or exporting any drugs. And it's only that when we came into power and put back in the former drug lords into power, that Afghanistan became a narco state once again. And those drugs came here to the U.S. It fueled a massive epidemic in terms of not just addiction, but overdose. And then that shifted from heroin to fentanyl. So the roots of this crisis lie in our war in Afghanistan. Like everything we talk about here, it just seems to keep coming back. We can't escape the roots of various problems in the United States, because so many of them are tied back to previous wars or crises or misadventures that we never rectified, that we never took responsibility for. And so that's what we're seeing here. We're seeing the consequences of our actions. This is America's war coming home. And then a war in Venezuela, what do people think is going to come from that? You know, I mean, certainly the instability. Can you name one war, Danny? One place the United States has invaded and attacked where it didn't spread? I mean, you look what happened in Vietnam. It spreads throughout Southeast Asia, Laos, Cambodia, Afghanistan, Pakistan is a great example of that. Iraq into Syria, throughout the region. You know what I mean? So the idea that somehow we're going to carry out this regime change, this war in Venezuela, and it's going to be confined to Venezuela. If someone knows of an example where that was the case, please put it in the comments, because I don't know of one. And then you have those who are chomping on the bit throughout Latin America to be next in line for the United States support. We saw this with Maria Machado, the Nobel Peace Prize winner, who is the heir apparent to Maduro, right? Once we remove Maduro, she's going to take his seat, supposedly. She said, yeah, once you free us here in Venezuela, once the Americans liberate Venezuela, then they're going to go next to Nicaragua and then to Cuba, you know? And then, so if you're these groups, if you're these organizations throughout Latin America, and you see the largesse of the United States, you see the United States willing to support your efforts to put in place, particularly a right-wing government, why wouldn't you try and get that support? We've already saw in Brazil a couple of years ago, the coup that Bolsonaro left. I mean, there's all types of movements throughout Central and South America that believe that getting American military support is the way for them to gain power. And they just have to demonstrate that they're worthy of that support. So the idea that this thing will be contained, it'll be neat, just a couple of F-18s dropping some bombs and it's all well and good. Yeah, I mean, that's just not what history has told us.
Yeah, I feel very confident that's not what's going to work. I'm in just a second here. I'm going to show you something that something else Rubio said there in terms of what all those warships are doing there. I want to precede that though with something from the Secretary of War, Pete Hegseth, who loves to explain. This is kind of early in the process. I think this is in September 3rd. So this is kind of at the beginning here. And he was on Fox News explaining how cool of a deal this is.
A very clear one. I can tell you that was definitely not artificial intelligence. I watched it live. We knew exactly who was in that boat. We knew exactly what they were doing, and we knew exactly who they represented. And that was Tren de Aragua, a narco-terrorist organization designated by the United States, trying to poison our country with illicit drugs. Last year, under the Biden administration, all 4 years, 100,000 Americans died from drug-related, from drugs, from the use of drugs, many of which poured in from Central and South America through our southwest border. Now, we're sealing the border, but President Trump is willing to go on offense in ways that others have not been. And to send that clear signal to Tren de Aragua, Cartel del Sols, and others emanating from Venezuela, we're not going to allow this kind of activity. You're poisoning our people. We've got incredible assets, and they are gathering in the region. And so you want to try to traffic drugs, it's a new day. It's a different day. And
So yeah, it's a different day. If you want to do that, you can go ahead, except that we just heard from the Secretary of State that actually doesn't do any good. And then he went on further to say all these boats, they're intel gathering.
There's a reason why we have assets in the region. Those assets do, among other things, collect intelligence. We're very confident in the intelligence we have, and nothing has happened. Nothing has happened in this entire process that has impeded our ability to identify drug boats and strike them.
So you heard him echo what Hegseth said there in September. Our intelligence is rock solid. We know exactly what we're hitting, who we're hitting, et cetera, and we know that these are drug boats, even though apparently some of the other countries and the people in the region say, yeah, some of those were not at all. And then you have him admitting it doesn't make any difference anyway. So it's just another example of how this just shreds bare that this is some kind of power play.
In so much of this, Danny, it comes back to the idea that these people in power are sadists. That's all they are. You know, I mean, these are men and women who, as Dostoevsky said, find blood and power intoxicating. You know, I mean, so if you look at a guy like Hegseth or Stephen Miller or Pam Bondi, I mean, these people are sadists. Kristi Noem posing in front of going to El Salvador and post, right? I mean, like, these people are sadists, and they like the idea, they like the power, they like the ability to do this to other people. They enjoy it. And this is who Donald Trump has brought into power with him. Either they're sadists, or they're con men like himself, or they're just yes men and sycophants, right? Or they're men and women who have succeeded because, just like Trump, he understood how to work the rigged and corrupt political and media and economic system we have in this country. So we shouldn't be surprised that they're carrying out this type of theater, this type of pornography. I mean, you see the way Hegseth talks about this, he lights up. He gets excited by it.
He does.
Right? He does. I mean, these are men and women who are the worst of us. And unfortunately, they are in power. And it'll be interesting to see. I don't know if he's spoken out yet, but Admiral Halsey, who was in charge of the U.S. Southern Command, so in charge of the U.S. military for Central and South America, he resigned, getting close to a month now, I believe.
Yeah.
We still haven't heard anything as to what happened there.
I heard that, and a lot of the rumors are that it was because he viewed this as an illegal order and he left. And on the one hand, if that's the case, then I guess fairly good on him for taking that action. But you're not going far enough by not saying anything, because this just leaves open the possibility that maybe you were fired or you weren't doing it good enough. Who even knows? For that resignation to matter, you've got to say something.
That's exactly right.
But I want to go, though. All might not be lost. So there are some indicators that maybe we have finally gone too far, or at least that it's making some people really uncomfortable. There was news out just a couple of days ago that the UK actually cut ties with our intel gathering in the Caribbean, because even for the UK, and this is saying so much, that they suspended some of their intelligence sharing with US over this boat strike concerns, because they say that it's not legal. And then we had, I think in today, we see that, or maybe it was yesterday, France has come out and said that they also view this as illegal, and they're also cutting back on their support here. So if you've got UK and France, who typically are just, whatever he said, the Americans, they've just been doing it no matter what. This seems like a pretty big deal. What do you say?
This is, Danny, just to make this clear, the UK has been entirely complicit in Israel's genocide. They're talking about intelligence. Their reconnaissance operations out of Crete that have overflown Gaza every day for the last 2 years have been integral to Israel's genocide in Gaza. But this is too far for the British, right? So that's how either one, it shows how obsequious or how unwilling Britain is to upset the Israelis. But it shows certainly how this is even too far, as you said, for the Brits. The Brits who will go along with things, like I said, they're fully involved with supporting Israel's genocide. But this open murder on the seas is too much for them.
That's too much. Yeah. And there's 80 had been killed so far. And then you say, okay, well, what is going to be the consequence of this? How far are they willing to go? Now, the immediate response, probably not surprisingly from the administration, is that they're saying, you don't tell me what international law is. Here was Rubio saying exactly that.
I don't think that the European Union gets to determine what international law is. They certainly don't get to determine is how the United States defends its national security. The United States is under attack from organized criminal narco-terrorists in our hemisphere, and the president is responding in the defense of our country. I do find it interesting that all these countries want us to send, and supply, for example, nuclear-capable Tomahawk missiles to defend Europe. But when the United States positions aircraft carriers in our hemisphere where we live, somehow that's a problem. So I would say that the United States is, and this president has made very clear, his job is to protect the United States from threats against the United States, and that is what he's doing in this operation.
So I thought he's pretty rich that he's doing a whataboutism. I was really kind of surprised. It sounds pretty petty. But look, I mean, the bigger issue that he's really talking about here is that nobody's going to tell me what international law is. And then in the context of the same conversation, he just got through telling you that, by the way, this whole thing about all the interdicting these boats, it doesn't make any difference. It doesn't actually help. It doesn't do anything. And then he says in that clip there, we're under attack and nobody tells us how we get to respond to our people, even though I just told you that actually doesn't have anything to do with the the drug issue there, because there's kind of this issue that we're willing participants in that, and we have the demand for it, so that's a separate issue right there. But I mean, he's literally all over the map. And so what I read out of this, you tell me if you see it any differently, is that we're saying we want to kill these people, we're going to kill these people. To hell with anyone who says anything otherwise, and I'll make up whatever excuse I have, and you will accept my excuse, and don't bother me again before I go kill these people. What do you think?
Yeah, it's the prerogative of power, right? It's the entitlement that comes from the seat he's sitting in. I mean, this is nothing more than that. It's as crass as you described it, Danny. The hypocrisy is amazing, and I'll say that I do agree with him in terms of stating the hypocrisy of the Europeans who want to steal Russian frozen assets, right, to use it to pay for the unwinnable war in Ukraine. That's rich that they are opposed to this. So the hypocrisy is throughout these capitals. But it gets to this idea that why doesn't it matter to use a force to stop the boats? As he was describing how it's not really that important. It's because for decades now, the U.S. Coast Guard has been so effective at shutting down sea routes into the United States that the drug traffickers come through Mexico, or they fly it in on planes. Again, the majority of people who bring drugs into this country are American citizens. But for decades, the American Coast Guard has shut down these sea routes. Yes, some get in, but most don't. They're very effective at it. And the idea that we can't stop these boats, we have to use a Hellfire missile against them. The Coast Guard does this all the time. The Coast Guard's got, they've got very good snipers. Their snipers have won the American military sniper competition a number of times, because you got to be a good enough shot to be on a hovering helicopter and take out the engines of a boat from 100 yards away or whatever. That's a pretty tough thing to do. So the reality of all this, that we're just awash in all this malarkey, right? All of these lies. I mean, we don't even know where to begin in our conversation on this, because which lie do you have to tackle first? And that's one thing that they're so effective at, whether it's Democrats or Republicans, they're so effective at just throwing so much stuff at us, or moving the goalpost, or putting up another boogeyman, or constructing another straw man, right? That we are always responding to that, as opposed to just basically saying, this is wrong. It's going to be counterproductive. And haven't we been here before?
Well, have we ever left? Maybe
have we ever left? I guess yeah, shame on me for asking that question, because we haven't ever left. Why do I keep saying we've been here before when we've never left it? You're right. Absolutely.
This is just the next chapter. I would be remiss, though, if I didn't say, we're looking for all these reasons, and, we've talked about whether it's oil or primacy and all that. We can't help but notice the timing here also could be very interesting, in that there is renewed focus, especially after Representative Grijalva has now been seated. This 218 vote threshold has been reached. These releases of these Epstein letters just from yesterday, which bring more and more heat and questions onto the President of the United States. Is there any prospect that this is just something to, all right, if it didn't work to keep the government closed and to keep Grijalva out, so we couldn't keep that in, and now then the Democrats have put it back on the headline, how's about we take it off the headline? What do you think?
Absolutely. This is, again, we've seen it before, right? Bill Clinton does this with the Monica Lewinsky scandal, sends, cruise missiles and F-117s into Serbia. The willingness of these people in power, again, they're sadists. Again, they're common grifters. They're just opportunists to utilize whatever they have to further their aims, including protecting themselves, including, as you said, deflecting from the Epstein scandal and whatever may come out of any future revelations. It's blatant, it's clear, it's overt. It can't be understood to be any other way. So that's not taken away from all the reasons why they want Venezuela. It's just a very convenient, shiny object to distract people and take the headlines as way, as you said, to disassociate or put space between the Epstein drama or the Epstein crimes, I should say. I don't want to belittle it. The Epstein crimes, and going to war in Venezuela.
Now, since we're on the topic, you may recall earlier this summer, there was a press conference on the Capitol lawn to where a lot of the victims came up, and they were talking about they want their files released, they want justice, et cetera. And some of the comments from some of the women at the time were, if you don't release the list, we will, because we're the victims of it, so we know who abused us, et cetera. And we haven't heard anything from them since that time. And at first I was thinking, well, why aren't they doing this? Because obviously the government is continuing. I mean, I just can't imagine they're actually going to do it. But I have heard recently that the reason is because they're being threatened with severe lawsuits, which they can't afford. And so they're afraid to come forward with those names for fear of being abused. And so abused more now, even financially. What do you say to that?
Yeah, I mean, that happens throughout the United States. You have these slap lawsuits, as they're called, that are put on people who are trying to tell the truth, who are trying to blow the whistle or to speak truth to power. Those in power have the resources to shut people down. You can go to the extremes where people are murdered, right? Who commit suicide in unexplainable ways. I mean, there are those extremes, but more often than not, the most likely route is to bury people through legal action. It's a form of lawfare, if you will. And just the idea that you're going to hammer these people with so much in terms of court requirements, in terms of the need for attorney time, that you are going to bankrupt them, that their lives will be ruined, and that it will be this never-ending legal nightmare for them, that it doesn't make sense to go forward. Because unless you're in a vacuum, unless you're a single person and you can say, screw it, you've got a family, you can't do that, right? It can extend and hurt others. So that's the way that these the powerful, the ruling elite, the ruling class protect themselves. They use what's to their advantage. They use, they're not going to fight asymmetrically. They're going to use what leverage and power they already have. And so I think that may very well be the case. I mean, possibly I'd like to think, Danny, that maybe it's the case of you've got some decent people in Congress like Ro Khanna or Thomas Massie who have gone to these victims and said, just give us more time. We just need more time to get this done. Hold your fire kind of thing. We need more time. And to the Republican credit, there are 4 Republicans who are lining up against the president on this. There's Thomas Massie, there's Marjorie Taylor Greene, Nancy Mason, Lauren Boebert.
Yeah.
I mean, and so to their credit,
a lot of pressure here in the last to back off of her vote. And so far she hadn't done it. Exactly.
I mean, so you could expect a primary challenger. We already know Thomas Massie is being challenged. Miriam Adelson is going to give $20 million to unseat Massie, and right.
That's
so
on its own right.
Right. And Green's already on the outs with the Republican Party in a lot of ways. But Mason Boebert, they are MAGA. They are true believers. They are devotees of this administration. So for them to step out against it, knowing that, and I probably couldn't find anything good to say about either one of those women, either one of those members of Congress, except for this. It is admirable in a way that they have to understand the consequences, but perhaps they have been witness, or they've been the victims have made their stories known to them, just for them to say, you know what, this is what I'll make a stand on it. This is a hill I will die on. Yeah, because I mean that is the consequences for all 4 of those members of Congress are existential, if you will, politically. So we'll see, and then we'll see what documents will come out. Will the administration, if the Congress says you have to release all this information, will the administration comply? Supposedly the FBI has all the photos and videos that they took from, right? Will Kash Patel throw them all in the incinerator? Right. Rather than
that's what we don't know. And by the way, for those who may be encouraged by this discharge petition, they need to understand that that's only like part 1. Then it also has to go to the Senate, where it requires a 60 vote filibuster answer, which means that you have to have people crossing the aisle. It's got to be bipartisan, and then it requires a presidential signature, or it has to go back to Congress again for a 2/3 majority, which seems pretty unlikely that they're going to get. So we're probably not anywhere closer to actually getting to them. But what one wonders if this might start enough of a momentum to where people like say, all right, forget about hiding behind procedures, release the damn files, let us see for ourselves, et cetera. Because I perceive, Matt, and tell me what you think of this, is that this is a really, really important moment for American democracy. If this is allowed to be suppressed, whether it's through wag the tail, dog wag the tail, kind of tail wag the dog going into Venezuela, whether it's just, letting it get buried and lost forever in the Senate debates or whatever, or go back and forth, et cetera, whether it dies there and doesn't ever get led. If we have a situation where everybody in the world knows that there are powerful men who abused women, and by the way, we had somebody on the show yesterday who suggested it's not just the immoral things that were done in there, but there was also some Mossad and some CIA, some issues that were done there, which would be profoundly disturbing to all Americans. And a lot of people don't want this stuff out there. If they succeed in getting this suppressed, and meaning that they literally got away with all of this, that does not bode well for the existence of our democracy. What do you think?
Right. I think it's this continual erosion, this understanding of the public of what their elites are like, this understanding of who the ruling class is. I think most in the public recognize that if there was nothing in these documents, if there weren't incriminating photos or videos, they would have been released by now. Why? I mean, so the guilt of the Trump administration is being demonstrated by its actions. I think that's how most of the American public view this, including its supporters. I think, unfortunately, the way that the political establishment views it is that the likely reaction of those who are disgusted and disappointed to the point of losing faith or dropping their support for Donald Trump will simply not vote. And while that can be a problem, it's not as bad as that they're going to vote for the Democrats. And so I think these really base calculations, these really mechanical or transactional calculations are what the administration is doing here. And the Democrats, function the same way. I think, unfortunately, what we're going to have is not so much people rising up against the government, but people dropping out, more people not voting, right? Less people voting, less people taking part. Because it's simple, the system is not worth it. It can't be trusted. It's all rigged. It's all crooked. It's all corrupt, which there's a lot of truth to that. But the danger in people dropping up and giving out is entirely what the ruling class wants. Entirely what the oligarchs, the plutocrats, the political establishment, it's entirely what they want. And so I think that's the calculation why they want to resist this. They think that's how they view it playing out. But certainly just by their actions, we can tell there's stuff the assumption has to be that there's stuff in these files, in these documents, in these videos and photos that are incriminating to Donald Trump and the Republican Party.
And kind of tailing off into that, kind of to wrap up a bow on the governmental portion of that, which feeds into this sense that there's no point in even participating because we're powerless to do anything about it. I want to get your views on this recent shutdown fiasco. So obviously it was, I think, 43 days, a new record. The second record, which of course the first one was also under the Trump administration. And this one was characterized, and I've done a number of shows on this up to this point, and to me, it was really characterized on the Republican side, especially of just this gross mocking of the system, the insulting of the intelligence of the American people by saying things that were self-evidently untrue and saying with a lot of gusto, just outright lies about what the Democratic Party, why they were doing this, what they were believing, and what they were trying to get, which is categorically against what it was. It was all about helping the people with these ACA. Now, I'm not a shilling for the Democrats. In fact, I'm opposed to the Democrats in a number of different categories, and I don't consider myself part of either party. But at least on this one issue, the Democrats were indeed fighting for these ACA extensions, which makes healthcare, as bad as it may be and as problematic as the ACA may be, it still is healthcare, and they get something that they can at least afford with the subsidies. Now, you take these subsidies off, and millions of people are going to lose their health care, or it's going to just devastate their finances and make them have to cut back in other things to survive, et cetera. And it's going to really put a big burden on them. And that's what the Democrats were trying to get done. The Republicans seemed to oblivious to that. They literally went to the Supreme Court to keep paying SNAP benefits when they had the money and a direct order from the court to do so. I still don't understand why they did that. And then the Democrats are saying, all right, after this big blue wave that happened a week ago on Tuesday, where they won all these things, and it looked like they had a lot of headwinds because it was so much against the Trump administration as a direct reaction to it, which the exit polls confirmed. Then all of a sudden, 8 Democrats just kind of rolled over, and they said, okay, Republicans, you can almost have everything you want. What they got was just little chicken feet around the edges, but basically they got what they want. But here's the issue. That only gets us to the end of January 30th to be specific. And with the promise that the Republican Senate will hold a vote on the ACA issues in December at some point. But the Republicans have been adamant, especially Trump, that they absolutely detest the ACA. They think it was a disaster. It's horrible. I can't imagine that after all that, they're going to say, but sure, we'll extend it for a year, even though we rejected out of hand that offer earlier before the Senate finally agreed to what they did. Where is this going to go next? And what is going to happen to all these people? And will there be another shutdown here in just a few weeks?
Yeah, I agree with everything you said there, Danny. That was very well said. And you've already had Speaker Johnson saying, I'm not going to hold this vote for ACA subsidies.
He's
right?
not even
he's already said it.
The Senate may, but without both the House, it doesn't matter.
Yeah, I mean, that's why. And then you can't even have Democrats throw Chuck Schumer out of his position. If someone should be held responsible within the Democratic Party for this failure, this was a failed effort. And it was done. I agree. It was for the right reasons. They were fighting the good fight, and then they abandoned it. And someone needs to be held responsible for that. I think the same way too, this continuing resolution is going to go until the end of January. And then what? And unlike now, where we have the upcoming holidays to restart the government because of the air traffic control situation, I think that was the prime driver in this, is that we've got 2 weeks into the holidays. We need to figure this out because the airports need to be working for the holidays. It's going to be into January. And, maybe some people will get bent out of shape because they're going to miss their Valentine date, someplace or whatever. But there's a long period of time that this country might have to endure before there's some other inflection point where the two parties have to actually come to some form of agreement.
And let's look at that ACA. Do you foresee any possibility that the Republicans would do something? I mean, if not just extend them for a year, which they said they rejected out of hand, will they do something? Because I think I saw one report that suggested maybe 52% of those people are actually Republican voters, so they don't want to make their people mad. How do you see that playing out?
I mean, you would think that the Republicans would look at this and say 26 is an election year for the House. Everyone's back at the ballots. One of the things interesting about the 8 Democrats, or 7 plus Angus King, that abandoned the Democrats' shutdown was that none of them are up to vote. None up for election in 26. Right? They've all got time. So the idea is that people will forget about this. For the Republicans in the House, people aren't going to forget about this. And I don't understand that political calculation then to allow people's ACA to double or triple or whatever it is, as is being stated. So it doesn't make that base political sense for them to protect themselves. But I think they feel that they can make the argument that this is the Democrats' fault. So many of them come from districts that are gerrymandered, so that they only have to survive their primary challenge. So the concern for them is not going to be a primary challenger who's going to be yelling about the ACA. It's going to be a primary challenger who's yelling that you defended the ACA. You kept Obamacare in place. And I think
Oh,
that's
man,
the
I didn't even
Republican
think of that.
calculation for the 26th cycle is they're more concerned about maintaining their positions and not losing primary challenges than the handful. And we know it's a handful. It's like out of 435 House seats, it's something like only 30 are competitive. And now with all this redistricting that's going around the country, it'll be even less. You're talking about maybe a dozen seats that will be competitive, maybe throughout the entire country. So I think that's maybe Johnson and others' calculation is we can handle that. But we got to make sure our primary challengers don't have anything to stand on, because
that
they haven't beating this
also
Obamacare thing for
that also
a
assumes,
decade and a half.
though, even on the our side, even within a primary issue, that enough of these people don't either lose their coverage or have their premiums go to where they can't afford it, to where they're sick and tired of any R that they don't want in there. So, I mean, districting or not, or, where these competitive are right now. But I mean, it seems to me that there's a real problem that people are going to say, Republicans I'm talking about, Republican voters are going to say, screw you all. I don't care what y'all do. Don't screw with my health care. Is
Right.
that a possibility? Or do you think that the people will go, yeah, I'll vote for R anyway, even if I lost my health care?
That's a real possibility. I mean, the same thing happens to the
snap.
Democrats. I mean, that's a possibility, but I think that they're more concerned with the primary the primaries, than they are with the general elections. And of course, you have a lot less people turning out to vote. The people who turn out to vote in primaries are usually really pretty hardcore base ideological voters. And these are people who hate Obamacare, even though they're benefiting from it, they hate it, And so I think that's what the calculation is.
And I'm sorry, on that topic, one of the things that Trump said in one of his Truth Social screeds in the midst of all this was, you know what? Forget about the ACA at all. Don't extend it. Just get rid of it, period. And let's just give all this money back to all the people and let them get a better one and a higher quality at a lower cost. What a great idea that would be. That briefs well, as we used to say in the military. But that doesn't even exist. That's just a mere fantasy, because there is no such system that could even happen. And they have had, the Republicans, over a decade now to come up with an actual plan, and yet they specifically don't. Why do you suppose that is? I mean, wouldn't it even be in their political interest to say, all right, here's a better plan. You don't like the ACA, you don't like Obamacare, that name is attached to it. Okay, here's one that actually works. Why have they not come up with a plan, and why do their followers continue to be okay with it?
Because I don't think there's anything out there that's going to be better for the health insurance companies than the ACA. I mean, one of the Republican Party talking points on this has been the Democrats want to subsidize private health insurance companies, which is true. That's what essentially you're doing here. Now that shouldn't be the case. I believe in having a national healthcare system, a single payer system, Medicare for all, what do you want to call it? But the reality is you can't let, these rates double and triple and quadruple or whatever. As bad as the system is, you can't throw the baby out with the bathwater. So I think the reality of the Republicans, because in Trump's first administration, they did try to repeal the ACA a number of times. They could have done it, and they had no alternative. And I believe it's because for the health insurance companies, the ACA is the best thing. This is what many of us who are libertarians, whether you're a left libertarian or a right libertarian, we're saying this is wrong about the ACA. You're forcing people to purchase a product from a private company. The mandate of the ACA, that goes against my right to, to not purchase something from someone if I don't want to. And so that's why the ACA is so beneficial for the health insurance companies, is because people have to purchase their product. And so why would the health insurance companies be okay with the Republicans changing that? Now they could change other aspects of it, but fundamentally redoing the system is not in the best interest of the health insurance company. And the health insurance industry, just like the military industrial complex, just like big agriculture, just like the banking industry, they are supporters of both parties, right? Both parties are beholden to the health insurance company, the health insurance industry. So I think that's the explanation, Danny. I don't think they have anything that's any better that they want to offer. And two, the main thing is I think it was up to the health insurance company. And we have to remember that this ACA, the Affordable Care Act, Obamacare, whatever you want to call it, this originally was a Republican plan. This was a conservative plan that comes out of both Massachusetts when Mitt Romney was governor, but also I believe out of the Heritage Foundation. I may have my provenance not exactly correct there, but the genesis of this idea of requiring or mandating coverage through private health insurance companies is essentially a Republican plan from the 1990s that the Obama administration utilized, for its own purposes.
I remember Mitt Romney
I
talking that up during his presidential runs and whatnot.
Yeah, right, exactly. Remember that? Yeah. So, but it is. I mean, and the reality is that most people, are living in this country.
So let me ask you something. Speaking of Republicans and the healthcare, one of the presentations that Senator Graham had here recently was he had this big old chart, big pie chart he put up on the Senate floor, and he was showing the evils of the healthcare companies that have like hundreds of millions of dollars a day in profit or revenue, whatever that they draw in. He was talking about all that evil and stuff like that. But don't I recall correctly, and if I am wrong, correct me here, but it seems to me that both Republicans and Democrats get a lot of money from the healthcare industry in terms of campaign financing.
Oh, absolutely. It's massive.
They're fine no
it's as
matter
big
who's
as
employed, right?
Yeah, it's as big as any other industry, right? I mean, you have, they are going to receive millions upon millions of dollars in the aggregate from the health insurance industry, just as they do from the weapons industry or from the banking industry or from big pharma or from the agriculture industry or from whoever, right? This is the reality of having a government that is a system of legalized bribery. And so you've seen that in statements from Democratic and Republican leaders, but particularly on the Democratic side. Dick Gephardt years ago spoke in front of a health insurance company forum, a convention, and said, "Don't worry about it. There'll never be single payer or universal or a national healthcare system here." Hillary Clinton laughed about it when she was asked about it. You had Joe Biden saying that if it came to his desk, universal health care or Medicare for all, he would veto it. I mean, they're so firmly entrenched with these interests, with these donors, that there's no separation. Our hope is that you have people from the outside who can shake it loose. And that's a pretty vain hope, I think, but yeah, there's no difference. The reason why we have these policies, the reasons why we have $1 trillion defense budget, the reason why your school tells you that the pizza sauce on your kid's pizza at lunch counts as a vegetable. This is all because of these industries that control our government. We talk a lot. We talk about the Israel lobby and everything else. The Israel lobby is nothing special. It's just that the Israelis are utilizing the American government through this legalized bribery system in the same way that, how many other industries or how many other special interests are doing it. So
the bottom line to all this part is that it for the American people I'm talking about, it doesn't matter Republican, Democrat, this system, that system, no system. It's going to pretty much stay like it is. And all of the people, the elites in power, have incentive to make sure it stays that way. And they'll be punished if they don't go to anything else, whether it's single payer, healthcare for all, something that doesn't even exist yet. Nobody in power wants to change the system because that would upset the financial apple cart. Did I wrap it up there?
That's absolutely the case. What's the incentive to do so? And even those on the Democratic Party side who spoke about this, who've been very eloquent about this, Bernie Sanders, or, certainly you have the squad, say someone like Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez, they say nothing about Medicare for all at all. I mean, they'll say it now that Trump's in office, knowing that it's an impossibility. But when you have a Democratic president and you have a Democratic Senate and a Democratic House, you hear nothing about it, And so it's something that's tightly controlled in terms of this is something that's useful to speak only when it's not possible. But when it is possible, don't dare bring it up because that threatens our donors. That's threatens.
And so this just has the effect of what you said a minute ago. And by the way, I don't know. Do you have to leave? By the way, because I know we're a little. Okay.
Good. Yeah.
This gets back to what you said a second ago, which is just the next piece in the cog that undermines confidence in government. Period. Yeah. No matter who's in charge here, by the American people, and they're losing faith in it. Now, one of the other things here that I want to talk about in the last bit of time that we have here you mentioned it a second ago, also this redistricting thing. So we have President Trump openly saying that he wanted Texas, and now it turns out to be a handful of other states as well, to redistrict for the exclusive, express, and unhidden reason to get additional Republican seats that I'm entitled to, was the phrase that he used.
Right.
And so you had the Democratic governor in California saying, okay, what's good for the goose is good for the gander. We're going to do the same thing. Prop 50 just passed a week ago on Tuesday. And so now then they're going to be looking for the same thing to get 5 Democratic seats. And in both cases, what you have is the party leadership in each country placing the priority of the party above the needs of the people in their state. And so the Texans have prioritized Republicans, Democrats in California. And they're saying that anybody in all of these areas that you're doing that are of the wrong party have been disenfranchised. Your votes will no longer count. There's no point in you even going to the polls anymore. Straight up, that's the case here. Now, those are in 2 pockets here, but what does that do, Matt, to the integrity of the entire system that people across the country see?
Oh, it just makes it out to be a farce, right? It just makes it out to be empty and vapid, superficial, to be nothing more than a state controlled by 2 parties that represent the same major interests, whose whole purpose is to keep themselves in power. When you have a 2-state, a 2-party system, it's pretty easy for each side to receive their share. And you look at it here in the United States, every 4 or 8 years, the other party takes the White House, the House goes back and forth, the Senate goes back and forth. Each party has roughly the same amount of governorships. I know the Republicans have some more, but the Democratic states are bigger. Same with the state legislatures. So there's a sharing of power here. They all agree fundamentally on the major issues, the life and death issues. They're all capitalists. They're all under the thumb of their donors and the interests that they represent. And so they only can differentiate themselves on identity. And this is why we have this scourge of identity politics in the United States and cultural issues that they campaign on and that they argue about. And that's meant to have the American electorate identify as either red or blue in a tribal or a team manner. So that's the reality of American politics. It's something that's dominated by money, controlled by the wealthy, and essentially it's just one aspect of what is the ruling class. And there are divisions, there are hierarchies, there's cliques in all this. But if anyone thinks that just because the Republicans argue against the Democrats and vice versa, that they're not in the same club, if you will, as George Carlin would say, you're simply not understanding how the system actually works. Yes, they want seats, they want their positions of power that are limited within the structure, and they will fight each other for it. But their first priority is to maintain the structure as it is. That's why this idea that you're ever going to get someone in the Democratic Party or Republican Party who's going to create fundamental change is just unsound. There's no incentive to do that. There's no incentive to really pull down the facilities and institution of power and rebuild them, because that would cut your own throat. That would cause you to lose power, the seat that you have, the power that you have. And who is going to do that? What politician is going to do that? So, you have those who run independently. Both you and I have our experiences, quixotic, romantic, if you will, noble, maybe, but ultimately fool's errands, right? Because of the Leviathan that we're up against is so massive that to try and fight it symmetrically makes no sense. You're not going to get anywhere. So you have to figure out a way, I think, and I'm not sure what this is, how we change our country asymmetrically with our actions, because certainly going and voting red or blue is just going to continue the problems and the troubles and the issues that we have.
And for those who may have seen it, brother Elon Musk says, hey, you know what? How about a new party, the American Party? That's what we want. Something that'll help the American people by having another super rich billionaire who's kind of weird, chaotic, That's gonna give us. Now, I actually saw. Let me see. Let me kind of do a little bit on here. I saw this. If I can pull it back up, they're saying that. Well, this isn't the one here, but they actually said, Wall Street Journal apparently said, yeah, he's now kind of saying, well, maybe not. Maybe I'm not going to. Puts the pause on that. So I think he's starting to realize just how hard that is. But I mean, if a guy with the unlimited resources that Elon Musk has is not going to have any prospect on this, what would it take for there to be a new party? Because I'll just preface before you answer by saying I think that there will be one, but my guess in my gut tells me it's only going to come after a profound dysfunction to the point of possibly even bloodshed, possibly even some sort of version of a civil war, to where it's not just that where you're rolling your eyes and the government can't even do its job. It can't pass a budget, but I mean, like literally it can't govern at all. And now all of a sudden you have across the board, people can't get food. They can't get health care. They can't get a job, and nothing is working. And then you have the potential for something, but I fear that it can only come after that. And I hope that you're about to tell me that, no, there is an asymmetrical way that can prevent us even getting to the violent issue. What is it?
I don't know, Danny. I wish I knew. I mean, the idea of the political structure as it is so besodden with money, right? I mean, so if you want to run, just even in my local town races here, 55,000 people in our town, candidates are spending $15, $20, maybe even $25,000 for the town council race. You know, I mean, so there is just that hindrance, that obstacle of money, and how money controls and money decides. That is very, very difficult. If that was the case, you know, let me start over again then, because like, you know, what you're asking for is a solution here. And I mean, you can go back to the pat ones of worker strikes and organizing at that level and shutting down the system, and then building from a base grassroots effort that would bring you forward a populist candidate like we saw, say, at the end of the 19th century, or even like we saw like in the 1850s with the Republican Party. You know, I just think that the system as it is right now is so controlled, it's so structured that and the way our society is, that we're so dependent upon information coming through digital sources, that for a movement to get going, it's going to require so much money, so much support, that it will, and it might be successful to begin with and last a year or two. And we could talk about all different types of movements like that. You go back to, say, the teachers' strike, the teachers' strikes from 4 or 5 years ago, how successful they were. But where did it go to? What did it build into? You can point to Black Lives Matter, 25 million people on the street in the summer of 2020. Where did that go? What happened? You know, I mean, so it's this idea of that. Yeah, we certainly can get things moving forward. We can have grassroots efforts that mobilize millions, tens of millions of people. The problem is sustaining it. The problem is keeping it going. And that is the issue that I find difficult to crack when you're talking about how you force change in the political system, because it is existential for the duopoly. It is existential for the system we have in place here. We have that we have to exist with. And the idea being is that, say, someone like Elon Musk, who does have the type of money that you're talking about, if he was able to then force change, if he was able to insert himself through his candidates in key races around the country and disturbed the very well manipulated, very well manicured or controlled election process here. Again, everything's gerrymandered. So if you're able to throw some sand into the gears and screw things up in one or two places, the parties will take knowledge. Will take notice. That's the theory behind it. That's the theory behind independent politics, third-party politics. You're not running to win, you're running to make change. So that if you cause a problem for the Democrats and they lose a U.S. Senate seat or they lose House seats because candidates that are running on universal health care or Medicare for all got votes and took votes away from the Democratic candidate. And in a three-way loss, the Democratic candidate who should have won in this gerrymandered district didn't win because the vote was split between a liberal and a leftist candidate. Well, that the theory is that would cause the Democratic Party to then say, you know what, we need to reevaluate here. Maybe we should be embracing more leftist policies, more policies like universal health care or Medicare for all. That's the theory. I've not really seen that play out. I've not seen it work, whether in a sense of you have that ability to disrupt the election and cause change, or when the disruptions occur, you often see the Democratic Party doubling down. Now, the Tea Party was successful through this with the Republicans going back 15 years. They essentially put a gun to the Republican Party's head and said, if you do not follow our lead, if you do not follow our principles, if you do not remain committed to a conservative agenda, we will leave the Republican Party and then you will lose against the Democrats. And the Republican Party adopted that. They followed that lead. They did as the Tea Party demanded. And if people remember at that time, going back 13 years, you had, what was his name? He was the House Republican whip, and the Tea Party defeated him. And I think people thought the same might happen with the Democratic Party, where AOC defeats in 2018 the third ranking member of the Democrats in the U.S. House. She defeats right. And, I think there was thoughts that, the Democrats will now start to listen. And what we've seen with Mamdani, people are saying, well, the Democrats will start to listen. But no, they won't. They'll try and cut their losses. They'll try and triangulate. They'll try and do whatever they can to preserve their power without affecting their donors in the interests that they represent, and not listen to the public who wants something different.
Well, listen, I'll tell you, Matt, and I'll tell this to everybody who's listening as well. My view is that because when you look at all the things we've been talking about in this episode, to include going to war, violating international law, shredding the U.S. Constitution, ignoring our domestic laws, even in pursuit of power, and then things that are affecting the lives of regular Americans here, and how the government is growing more and more dysfunction while the elite are consolidating power to prevent things like what you're talking about from actually succeeding. We are entering into, if we're not already there, into an eventual death spiral. Mm-hmm. Every country, every empire, that has existed in history eventually falls. And of course, a lot of people have talked about that. I've done a number of shows called the Next American Civil War, part whatever, and we'll continue to do that here. But at the governance level, forget about the policies for the moment. It's the system of governance that we have that will eventually destroy us all if we don't find some way to have an asymmetrical change, as you just mentioned, that can stop the slide and to turn it back around to where it can continue to live for some other longer period of time. Because if we don't get this, then you jump in if you disagree with me. If we don't change this and find some asymmetrical, nonviolent way to get this boat back unfloating and stop some of the bleeding, we're going to get into a situation where the only thing left is a violent eruption. And I fear that day.
Right. I mean, certainly all the metrics are there, right? All the statistics are there. I just looked it up again the other day. It's now up to over 65% of Americans are living paycheck to paycheck. That's the latest understanding. And about half of people who make over $100,000 a year are living paycheck to paycheck. This idea there's a differentiation between the working class and the middle class, I don't really think that's true anymore. Certainly there is differences, don't get me wrong, but when you're living paycheck to paycheck, regardless if you're working class or middle class, there's an anxiety, a fear, a frustration, an anger that you're living with the entire time. And all these other issues, all the overhead that we're all consumed by, our healthcare costs, our education costs, our utilities costs, it's just putting a burden on people. And then you look and you see the elite getting away with it, right? You see the elite being able to live differently than we are. Or you see that it is, as George Carlin, one big club and you're not a part of it. Dick Cheney dies and Nancy Pelosi and Bill Clinton and Joe Biden and Kamala Harris are writing these gorgeous eulogies for that war criminal, right? And you say, what am I doing here? Why am I taking part? And then you drop out, or you become apathetic, or you feel that nothing you can do is going to matter. But then at some point, to your what you're saying, Danny, it's going to get where there is a breaking point, right? There is where the response is going to be violent. And, certainly a nation with this degree of wealth inequality, with the haves versus the have-nots the way they are, history tells us that something like that is nearly inevitable. So how do we find something that counters and reverses the degradation and the deterioration and the demise of our country? And it's very difficult because the ruling class is so good at putting things into place to hinder, right? So look at unions. You would think, let's do it through the unions. Let's have a general strike, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. The unions have been so broken, dismantled, co-opted in this country for decades by both Republicans and Democrats that their power to do what they did in the 19th century it's not there. It's not there. And the process to rebuild that is going to take decades. So I agree with everything you're saying. And I'm sitting here with this frustration of, being a talking head and not being able to provide any solution for this. I will say that, as my friend Eleanor said to me over the weekend, we're all grains of sand. But it doesn't take many grains of sand banded together to stop the machine. Right. So I think that there are solutions out there. And the problem being is that we have to be organized enough to implement them. It's very difficult, though. It's very difficult.
Yeah, it is. And I pray for that nonviolent way to be found. Certainly worked when Martin Luther King Jr. Applied it. Maybe one of the only ones we've ever had to be able to stand up to that kind of pressure. But we sure need another one.
Yeah.
I'd love to see it happen soon. But listen, thanks for going along with us today. Really appreciate that. Thanks for this. It was too important to just let go here. So I appreciate you and your great insights. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you, Danny. I appreciate I wasn't expecting such a wide-ranging conversation, and I enjoyed it. Thank you.
I did too. Thank you very much, and look forward to the next time you're on. And we look forward to you guys as well. Be sure and like and subscribe if you haven't done it on your way out. And we'll look forward to seeing you tomorrow on the Daniel Davis Deep Dive.